There's no doubt you've watched Michigan on television at some point this year, but to really know Penn State's next opponent, each week I bring in an expert from the opposing team to give you the deep dive into their roster. This time, it's Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine, part of the On3 network, one of our new co-workers here at On3. So Clayton, welcome to the BWI Daily Edition. Super excited to have you here.
Excited to be here. This is a big game, so excited to talk about it. And yeah, On3, man. Things have been going super smooth for us, and I imagine it's the same for you guys. We're just blessed to be a part of this thing.
I'm so overjoyed to be a part of On3. I can't even begin to tell you, and this is not a sales pitch to anybody. I'm going to do the sales pitch later, but this is genuine. Like, I am so happy about being at On3 and having this opportunity. So this is super cool. And we have this awesome network of people to talk to, other smart people that know football, and I love that. So we're going to do that today here on the BWI Daily Edition, getting into Michigan. And normally, Clayton, I always start with the quarterback because doesn't it always? Except for with Michigan. We'll get to Cade McNamara, but it really, for me, watching this offense all starts up front. Is that fair to say with that offensive line?
Yeah, I would say so. And coming into the season, they talked a lot about how they wanted the identity of the offense to be, what the offensive line is going to be. And they said what they wanted the offensive line to be would be super physical, being able to play athletically. And some of these guys, man, we just hadn't seen it. And there had been injuries in the last couple of years. Specifically in 2020, and then they have just completely exceeded expectations with a new offensive line coach and Sharon Moore, who was moved over from the tight ends, got the co-offensive coordinator tag. We knew he was a really good coach, a really good recruiter, a guy that connects well with his players, but man, has he done a great job with this group. We were talking a little off air about how you wanted to get into Harbaugh and, a little bit of the changes with this offense, man. You're seeing it up front, more gap blocking schemes as opposed to zone, which is Harbaugh's roots, right, at Stanford with the 49ers
Are you reading my question sheet? Because that was something I wanted to talk about. Yeah, absolutely. You can see that. So when it comes to the identity of this offense and kind of the percentages of what's Harbaugh, what's former Penn State coach Josh Gattis, what is, maybe other in that category, how would you break down what the offense is as a whole in this iteration? Because to me, as you just talked about, it seems like it's changed from last year, but it seems like it's changed from year to year to year with this group of coaches.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I was listening on James Franklin's, press conference on Tuesday, and he was asked that question, how have you seen the Michigan offense evolve under Josh Gattis? Is it the same as, what you expected him to run coming out of working for you at Vanderbilt and Penn State, which he did? And he said, yeah, it seemed like it was that the first year, maybe two. We're in year 3 now of Josh Gattis here in Ann Arbor. And he said now it looks like a little more, Jim Harbaugh Stanford principles, which we just talked about and, we can get into. It has evolved. And I think it started this offseason back in January when there was a lot that was up in the air. I mean, Jim Harbaugh needed to sign a contract extension because he just had 1 year remaining on his deal. It's suicide. You can't do that in college football and recruit and all that. So it was kind of this time to evaluate the entire program. He replaced 6 of his assistant coaches, mostly on the defensive side of the ball, but was looking for more help for Josh Gattis on the offensive side because the offense, frankly, took a step back in the 2 years under him when it was really supposed to kind of go to the next level and, implement some more spread principles. And he's done some good, but I think there were some concern spots, and one of those was the run game where, they were running so well in 2018, and then Gattis came in, more zone running, and try to get some quick game passes and things like that. But I think Harbaugh wasn't going to leave anything to chance. What he knows best is some of those gap principles where we're going to have a few guys pulling, or we're going to have, we're going to trap you here. They're still running some wide zone and things like that. Yeah. You saw that with a 62-yard run last week with Hassan Haskins. But I'd say that the biggest difference is that there's more input for Josh Gattis now. Jim Harbaugh has gotten a little more personally involved in the offense. Mike Hart, the running backs coach, who was the assistant head coach at Indiana and is a rising star, former Michigan running back, all-time leading rusher for the program, has some input there. And then Sharon Moore, the guy I talked about, to kind of sync that up with the offensive line. Now he's the co-offensive coordinator, to sync up what his offensive line does well with, what they want to do offensively and kind of bring that into the overall philosophy, I think has been pretty big. So it's kind of all hands on deck. And man, has it been impressive the way that they've improved the run game this year. And, the pass game has come along, and everyone wants to talk about the running, but really they've been able to throw in some of these games as well. And, because the first couple games of the year, they were right down there at the bottom in pass attempts with Army, Navy, Air Force. So people were frustrated, even though they were 2-0. They ran, I think, 50 sometimes against Washington and all that. But
Stop. You're giving Penn State fans so much jealousy right now. After the season Penn State has had this year, running 52 times, what you described is a spread offense with an old school power offensive line, which is everything Penn State fans have been begging for the last 8 years with James Franklin. It is hilarious. When I put on the film, looking at it, it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen. Where you've got the tackles have their hand in a 3-point stance. Everyone is in a traditional front, and you're just in shotgun the whole time. But it seems like it's been effective so far this season. One of the things that James Franklin mentioned is they've gone to a lot of 6-man fronts. How effective has that been when they put that 6 offensive lineman on the field, or the converted offensive lineman who's playing tight end? I don't know his name off the top of my head, but how have those sets worked for Michigan? Because it has been something that's been effective against Penn State's defense.
Yeah, you might think that he's talking about Joel Honigford, who played tackle for the first 3-4 years of his career. Jim Harbaugh walked into the offensive line meeting room and said, "Honigford, tight end?" And he said, "Yeah." He got his stuff and went to the tight end room and lost like 60 pounds or something like that. And he's been there ever since. No, James Franklin's not talking about that. Honigford's out there, but so is another offensive lineman. And they've been doing that the last few weeks. Trente Jones, a guy who's in the 2 deep at, right and left tackle, mostly right tackle, has been coming in, giving them that, bigger package. They've used a couple guys in that spot this season. It's been effective, especially in the last couple weeks. But, they've been a little bit spotty when it comes to short yardage. One thing that I think has kind of frustrated me watching the offense is in those short yardage situations, they do bring in those heavy packages, and you bring everyone to the middle of the field. And if one guy misses a block, then that's the end of it. Yep. Sometimes, Michigan had this against Michigan State when slot receiver A.J. Henning missed a block and he was bunched in tight. And it was like, why don't you just split him out a little bit more and take the defender out of the play that way? They would think it was on a 4th down or 3rd down and 1. So it's been here and there. It hasn't been great in short yardage, but some teams, especially earlier on in the season, they were able to just kind of maul them with bringing all these guys in. I mean, you'll see 3 tight ends in there. So it's typical Jim Harbaugh fashion in that way.
I had to resist getting my Zippo out because you were preaching to me on that of what this is something that and to get totally off topic here, something that has been a conversation in the NFL and in college football for about 5 or 6 years is look how small defenses have become. Defensive linemen are smaller, linebackers are smaller. All you have to do is get this big physical offensive line and then you can just run over people. It's super simple. And remember, everything's cyclical in football. And yes. When you put on the film and everything you just said is true, one guy misses and you've got everyone in there. Everyone. Right. One guy misses a block, which when you have 9 guys on there, that's likely to happen. The play is over. And by the way, teams are doing this. Michigan is now a part of the Minnesota crew. Illinois now doing this, as Penn State is painfully aware of. And another team that is escaping me right now are going to these big 6 offensive lineman sets. And that's how Minnesota loses to Illinois. And it's the thing that if Penn State has to find a way to adjust to it, but when they do, I think that this is an easily countered thing. Now, that being said, they have yet to really They have yet to actually counter that. So it might be something that happens in this game that it's effective. The running backs really are the stars of this team, right? As far as the offensive line has had a much better production, but those guys are also special and making up for a lot of plays that are mistakes. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah. And I don't have the exact numbers. I haven't looked this week, but they're up there when it comes to yards after contact. So it's not all the offensive line. I give them a lot of credit because, the offensive line struggled last year. They've gotten so much better, and they are playing at a high level. But, man, I mean, this running back duo Michigan has, and Hassan Haskins, who's a bigger back, about 6'1", 225, and then Blake Corum, who's shorter, a little bit stockier, a little bit Mike Hart-esque when it comes to stature, but quicker, man, and faster. You kind of have that 1-2 punch. They call them Thunder and Lightning, which is what they nickname themselves. And they feed off of each other. It works. Hassan Haskins is in there. He's H2 is his nickname. It's third and H2 when he's in there, and he's able to get that extra yard. Jim Harbaugh, nothing he loves more than a big back that can get the extra yard. He talks about it. When it's blocked for 2, he can get 4. When it's blocked for 5, he can get 11. Things like that. He's that guy. Blake Corum is a guy who wants to make you miss. He can lower his shoulder. He's gotten better at that, but he loves to get out in space, make that move on you, get around the edge and all that. And Michigan running him on the edge. The problem is that he looked like he hurt his ankle last week, only played a few snaps. So the load was on Hassan Haskins, and Blake Corum's status coming into this game is massive for Michigan. We're not going to know a ton. Feels like a sprained ankle. That's what it looked like to me. He was in the tent, was able to move around a little bit when he got out of the tent, but then ended up in a boot by the end of the game in street clothes. So he's one to watch. This is a banged up Michigan offense. I'm sure we can talk about some other names as well, but the running backs have been outstanding. I mean, each of them look like they're probably going to get 1,000 yards this year. I think Haskins might be over 800 now. Corum is nearing 800, so just ridiculous with some of these numbers, and so it's been really impressive.
Blake Corum 778, 7th in the Big Ten in rushing, and Hassan Haskins is 4th with 829 yards. They, if it weren't for Wisconsin, they'd be the only team that has 2 rushers in the top 10. But much higher ranked than both of Malusi and Braylon Allen over at Wisconsin, and talented guys. What is their ability to break big runs, especially Haskins, the bigger guy? How much explosiveness does he have in that rushing attack?
He has some. He's faster than maybe you think. He ripped off a 62-yarder last week, and then I guess he came back to the sideline, and per one of our contributors, Doug Karsh, who's also the Michigan radio sideline man, he was joking with his teammates that he can run a 4.4. I don't know if that's true, but his vision has gotten a lot better. So that's turned in some of his 6-7 yard runs into 15-yard runs. He had a huge 50-yard run against Nebraska in which he hurdled the defender and then landed on his feet in stride and ran another 20 yards. And this was to come down and kick the game tying field goal in an eventual thrilling win in that game late in the fourth quarter. So he's kind of clutch with when he'll rip one off. More later in the game almost, when it's like, man, the defense have been taking a beating trying to tackle him all game. He could rip one off. Corum is more of the big play guy. You'll see him on the edge if he does play. And he's just so quick. Has gotten more patient this season and really lets things develop. So they can rip him off, but this is more of an offense. I'll say this, they've had some big runs, but in some of these games when they are playing a tough defense like a Wisconsin, like they're going to play with Penn State this weekend, they've done a good job of just staying steady and staying in front of the sticks. I mean, they've only had a handful of negative rushes this year. So the most impressive part is just their ability to kind of get themselves in second and third and manageable.
We're talking Michigan and taking a deep dive into their offense right now. We'll get to their defense in just a little bit with Clayton Sayfie of the Wolverine. The Wolverine and, of course, Blue White Illustrated have a new home. From the founder of Rivals and 247 Sports, Shannon Terry, comes the next generation of high school and college sports fan experience. It's called On 3. Great news is that if you've been following Blue White Illustrated, where we've been previously at Rivals, You can get the same great content, and I'll say, plus more. We did way more this year than we've ever done at Blue White Illustrated, and it's going to continue to happen. We're going to continue to add more, and you can get it for just $1 for the new sign-up price. Come on over to On3 for just $1, 12 months for the first year. Link is in the description of all of our videos. You can check out there, and of course subscribe to our Blue White Illustrated YouTube page so you don't miss any of our videos. Clayton, the passing attack, you've mentioned a couple of times that while the star of the show is the running game, Cade McNamara seems to me like a very perfect fit for what Jim Harbaugh wants from his quarterbacks. Doesn't make mistakes, doesn't take a ton of sacks, and makes some really good throws when he has to. Is that a fair assessment of his skills and how he fits into the offense?
I think you nailed it. And yeah, Jim Harbaugh loves this type of guy. I think it was him that said it in the summer. It might have been Matt Weiss, the quarterback's coach, but he said, what's wrong with being Alex Smith or Ryan Tannehill? I know Ryan Tannehill's made a few more mistakes this year, but I mean, his season last season was unbelievable. And that's kind of Cade McNamara right now. At the same time, I don't want to pay him, put him in a box of being a game manager, because he made some big time throws against Michigan State. He made some big time throws against Nebraska, and he made some big time throws against Wisconsin in 3 of Michigan's biggest games this season. So he's not just that, but man, you have to start there when you talk about him. He's the guy who's shoving guys in the right direction. Sometimes they'll have, a tight end. They have all these tight ends on the field. Sometimes, it's like, where do I line up? He's telling guys where to go. He's sliding the protection. He's checking at the line. Things that fans don't necessarily notice, and Jim Harbaugh's talked about that when Cade McNamara has gotten a little bit of heat this season. It's some of the things that fans don't always see. And then during the play, he gets through his reads pretty quickly. He makes the right decision. He doesn't love to throw in tight windows. Yeah. You'll see it at times, and he can do that, but he's more of a guy that, if someone's kind of blanketed, he's just going to go to the next read. You'll see some checkdowns, but he plays it safe. He throws the ball away. He keeps you in manageable situations. He doesn't take sacks. Michigan's only been sacked 6 times this year. I think 4 of them have been on Cade McNamara. And, there's been some other opportunities, but he's just done a great job of getting the ball out quickly. So it starts there, but man, he showed a lot of people a lot of things in that Michigan State game. I think he was 28 for 44. He had 383 yards against the Spartans and a few touchdowns. He was big there and made some huge throws under pressure. I think he was 8 for 11 when he was under pressure in that game. So he's just really, really good. And then you can also blitz him. His numbers are better against the blitz, because it's like, okay, well, you're taking away a guy out of coverage. And he's such a good processor. He can find what's going on. Exactly. So he knows exactly what's hot, where to, to attack, where the blitzer came from and things like that. Just those little things. Some fans have been clamoring for J.J. McCarthy, the big-time recruit freshman, who's going to be very good here, in my opinion. But Cade McNamara has silenced the doubters a little bit in the last couple of weeks with just, his ability to really lead Michigan on scoring drives. They got to convert more in the red zone. Penn State's a great red zone defense. Michigan, 89th in the country in touchdown percentage down there. They got a great kicker, but they don't want to always have to use him so much.
Right.
But Cade McNamara has done a really good job this season. Solid, I think, is the best way to describe him. He's a little banged up. He's playing through injury right now. Looked like a ribs or kind of chest shot that he took against Michigan State that had him in the medical tent the last couple of weeks, in and out. He missed a drive against Indiana, but came back in. He's a tough kid. But yeah, he's done a really good job for what Michigan wanted to be this year and what they needed to do with a coaching staff under a lot of pressure, an offense that made a lot of adjustments. He's been that steadying force.
And this is kind of a you've answered some of this already, but from what I've seen, Michigan, their passing attack in general is not hyper aggressive. I think that's painfully obvious given that you've got 3 tight ends in the field at some points. But in the situations where they have to throw the ball, have they been explosive enough to complement the defense that is very good in the rushing game that's very good? I know that it's more of a complementary role. This kind of leans into the receiver conversation of who has stepped up in the absence of Ronnie Bell. I know it's been all season long they haven't had him, but how much do they miss him, and who stepped up into that role to provide that explosiveness in the passing game?
They've missed him a ton. I mean, he has led the team in receiving as a sophomore, as a junior. And then we saw him for a quarter and a half against Western Michigan in that opener, and he looked like a completely different player. Some of the stuff we were hearing behind the scenes coming into the year was that he did take the next step into that next level, upper echelon, Big Ten in the country type of receiver. So it sucked to see him go down. Michigan has missed him. I've been talking about it all season. The receivers, you just don't see a ton of separation with these guys.
Yeah.
Then a couple of weeks ago, against Michigan State in his hometown, freshman Andrell Anthony, who admitted he was not ready earlier on in the season. He didn't know what coverages were. He didn't know. He said he was a terrible run blocker and things like that. Just had his breakout game, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns, 93-yard touchdown, the second longest in Michigan history. And I'm sitting up there in the box with our guys, Chris Ballas, John Borton, and we're like, man, this is the best receiver on the team. Then he goes down. It looked like a concussion or something last week. So he's another guy that's banged up. But he's one to watch. I think he might be able to play this weekend. And he is 6'1", quick, gets separation, great ball skills. You saw him go up and moss a guy against Michigan State for his second touchdown. So he's a guy to watch. Eric All. He did not play last week. He got banged up late in that Michigan State game. I feel like I'm referencing that game a ton. But
it was a big game.
it was, and a lot happened. He came out of that game late. Looked like to me, based on warm-ups and the way he was moving around, dressed during the Indiana game, he could have played, but he's got involved in the pass game a ton over the last few weeks. And I think that's big if you're going to play tight ends, and they're not always in 13 personnel. It's a lot of 11, a lot of 12. But if you're going to do that, then they got to be a threat as well in the pass game. And I think Michigan has recognized that. He had 10 catches again against Michigan State because that was the last game he played in. And he's just been fantastic in the run game as well at times. So those are two of the bigger names to know. Cornelius Johnson leads this team in receiving with 400-something yards. Not a ton, not Jahan Dotson numbers for your leading receiver. But, I think he's struggled to get separation at times. But he's steady, and he'll run good routes and does get open when you kind of need him to. He had a big game, 108 yards against Indiana. So there's some targets out there. Yeah, in terms of explosiveness, I mean, they've been good enough with the way they've been able to move the ball with the run and just play overall good team offense. I think it's been good enough, and I think it's a little bit too much talked about that Cade McNamara can't make the big throws downfield, because we've seen him on some big pinpoint throws, on deep balls and things like that as well. So it's nothing to if Penn State loads the box, Michigan can absolutely burn them. And I know Penn State has great secondary players, but it's not like, this is something where if you load 8 guys in there, then Michigan just can't complete anything downfield.
Talking with Clayton Sayfie about the Michigan offense and defense, and I apologize, I've lost track of time because I've had such a good time talking to you. Hope you don't mind a couple more minutes, because we do have to talk about the Michigan defense, which we'll get to the guys up front in just a minute. But you had a great article about Mike McDonald, the new defensive coordinator. Everyone remembers Don Brown. From Penn State fans, Big Ten fans, everyone remembers Don Brown for some of the highs that defense had, and then some of the very lows that defense had. What has Mike McDonald done now? And I believe this is his second year on the staff. This is his first year on the staff.
Yep.
What has he done to change, especially that back 7 in coverage for Michigan?
Yeah, well, first of all, he's just not lining up everybody in the same spot every play and manning them up. They disguise well. Yeah, exactly. They disguise well. You see safeties over the top a little bit more.
Yep.
Man, a lot of what Penn State has done to Michigan over the last few years is because of, the things Michigan's not doing now. They're not going to have no safety over the top and allow who's the kid from Detroit that burned Michigan?
KJ Hamler.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to keep a slot safety on KJ Hamler and let him go 53 on one play. There's 2 safeties out there. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're going to see that. Penn State, notorious for against Michigan, Don Brown's defense motioning the running back out, taking a guy with him, and trying to get one-on-one on a wheel route. You saw Saquon Barkley have a huge game in 2017 against Michigan. Things like that, you're going to see a lot of differences. So if you're a Penn State fan that hasn't seen a lot of Michigan's defense, it has changed a ton. I mentioned disguising. I mean, they'll line up in one thing, and then, right at the snap, you can kind of notice the guy, oh, he's not manned up. He's in, quarters or whatever.
They play big boy defense now, is what I saw on
Right.
film. They do more mature things than just playing one coverage all the time.
Right. And, fair or not, or I mean, whatever it is, the truth is there were people inside that building that were frustrated, people on the defensive side of the ball that were frustrated with the lack of nuance to that Michigan defense over the last couple of years. They got burned against teams that said, we know exactly what they're going to do. If we motion one guy, we know what they're in, and things like that. So Michigan has basically combated that with an NFL defensive mind in Mike Macdonald, who I think is a rising star in this business, 33 years old, and is just, super smart, knows exactly what he's doing. We saw, some struggles. I still think once he gets some more guys in here, they're going to be a lot better. Michigan State ran 5 touchdowns on him. Kenneth Walker is a great back, but I mean, that shouldn't have happened. So you'll still see some lapses, but this is a much, much improved defense. They were, 90th in the country in total defense last year. They're in the top 20 now. So they've done a really good job. But yeah, stylistically, it's a lot different. More zone coverage, too.
With the Kenneth Walker thing, from the front, it seems like they're built to stop the run. So how disappointing was that for the Michigan defense that they did a good job on him most of the day, but those 2 explosive runs kind of put Michigan in a situation where that lost them the game. The passing attack, and they were getting pressure on Peyton Thorne, but really those explosive runs at poor times really were what change the game for that defense. So is that fair to say that they're really built to stop the run? And are there any weaknesses in that front 7 that Penn State might be able to exploit either through the run or the pass?
Yeah, I mean, I would say as an overall mentality, we were actually talking to a couple players Tuesday night after practice in press conferences. They said that their number one mentality is to stop the run and make sure teams can't run on them. Like, you're going to have to beat us another way. But at the same time, when it comes to like personnel and the way
that won't be a problem this week.
yeah, that's fair. But when it comes to like personnel and the way they kind of actually build it schematically, I wouldn't say it's necessarily just like built to stop the run, but but at the same time, I mean, they want to stop the run. You have bigger defensive tackles in there because it's more of a 2 down linemen, 2 edge guys. Is what we've really seen in nickel coverage or nickel on the back end with 2 traditional inside linebackers. So, but yeah, they've really done a good job at stopping the run. You mentioned it. I mean, it's a great point. I said coming into that Michigan State game that the big plays are what could hurt Michigan, that, they'll probably be able to bottle up Michigan State's run game most of the game. But if you let 1 or 2 out and those end up in touchdowns, then it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. So they've shored that up. And I know you were reading my article, earlier today, Wednesday morning, just about some things Michigan did, which I believe to be reactionary to that Michigan State game. Daxton Hill, who's just a superstar, could be a first-round pick at defensive back, next spring. He was playing nickel all season long. They moved him back to safety, both strong safety and free safety last week. He's able to kind of stay more in the middle of the field because we saw some safeties take some bad angles against Michigan State's run game. We also saw Michigan, Mike Macdonald, maybe he overthought it a little bit at times where they like to sub even when the other team doesn't sub. And we saw guys running on late. We saw 2 substitution penalties in that game against MSU. And they've kind of stopped that with Dax Hill is at safety. You bring in more of a hybrid guy who can move into the box and play the nickel. So you don't have to, based on down and distance situation, things like that, always sub. So they're making some adjustments there, but yeah, I'd say it's pretty much a bend, don't break type of defense. I know that didn't work in their one loss, but it's kind of keep things in front of you. They can get 2 yards on the ground. Like Michigan doesn't have a ton of tackles for loss this year, but they have a lot of like 2-yard stops and things like that. So it's been kind of that defense to keep everything in front. The opposite of Don Brown, which I described as don't bend, break. It was like whatever we do, like they're going to get nothing unless they get everything, right? So it's kind of opposite philosophies.
Yeah, especially when you got Jim Harbaugh's offense on the other side. That's like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take 15 plays and we're going to dominate your emotions on the way down the field.
That's
and then
what he
they
wants
get
to do. Yeah.
75 yards on one play, and it's like, well, you might be able to do that 3 times, and then your emotions don't matter. I don't really have a question about David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson. Just like, how good are they?
They're incredible, and we'll start with Aiden Hutchinson because you have to.
Yeah.
I was kind of wait and see mode this summer. He's coming off an injury, playing a new position, moving a little bit more outside and standing up on the edge. Okay, what's that going to look like? He was so good and so solid, as kind of a down defensive end. This is the perfect fit for him in this scheme. So I'll never doubt Mike McDonald when it comes to something like that again, until I have reason to. But Aiden Hutchinson,
he's playing the Odafe Owe role at the Baltimore Ravens. If there's a comparison, that's his role, is that the 2 down linemen in the middle clogging up the runs, and then these guys on the outside, they just go after the quarterback. And that seems to me what I watch. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. And Aiden Hutchinson's great against the run as well. Like, you'll see him make some plays where it's not even his fit. He has contain. He contains so well. The guy goes inside, but then he's the guy crashing down with one arm and making the tackle. Things like that David Ojabo is not necessarily doing in the run game. He's getting better at it. But, man, this kid, I've been raving about him for the last 5-6 weeks because he has 4 forced fumbles, which ties a Michigan single-season record. Still a few games to go. Had one overturned at Michigan State. That was a controversial call, as maybe people have heard about, that ended up in a touchdown. Long arms. He's only been playing football since 2017. Incredible. Comes from Scotland. He, even playing over there, it's not playing even high school football over here, right? So it's a little different. He comes over here, and this is really the first year he's gotten a lot of playing time. Played a little bit last season, shortened year anyway. And, he's getting better by the game. Like every single game, every game rep he has. And, some guys, you complain, man, why is that guy still out there? They're blowing out Indiana. When Ojabo was in there, I was like, what the hell? I mean, just get him reps. He's just getting better, like almost by the rep at this point. So he's been incredible on the other side as well. He's got more sacks than Aiden Hutchinson. He's got 8 on the season. Hutchinson was 6.5. So, man, I mean, Michigan has just continually pumped out these edge guys under Jim Harbaugh, and you were kind of worried, like, all right, what are they going to have when Aiden Hutchinson leaves? Well, David Ojabo's there. He might actually leave after this season because he's had such a good year. But they make this defense go when it comes to the pass game. This is the same secondary that got burned by a bunch of different teams last season. But the difference is Michigan's getting pressure, on the quarterback. Like, they can't get it out if they're down on the ground, holding the ball or whatever, or have to just throw it away.
Yep.
I will give the secondary credit, and I'll give Mike McDonald credit for what they've done to kind of mask some of those, issues back there.
Yeah.
They're good. Again, it's complementary defense. Yep. Like, it's the same thing with the offense. The front end helps the back, and what they're doing on the back end helps the guys at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, it's when watching them on film, they seem like they're a good team defense. They seem like they have good players. But if you're a Penn State fan, you feel confident that Keandre Lambert-Smith and Parker Washington and Jahan Dotson can get some plays against them. It's just, can you get the ball out? I watched Aiden Hutchinson run around a double team last week where the tight end and the tackle were in there, and it just didn't matter. And that's really, to me, the speed, the power. I said this yesterday on the show, that matchup between the tackles and the edge rushers, and how Sean Clifford, who has struggled under pressure, and I know that you've checked out these numbers for sure of his ability to play under pressure, that's going to determine the game for me. Because if Penn State can throw the ball, they can have some success against the secondary that is playing zone coverages for the most part, with cover one in there as well. If Sean Clifford stays in the pocket, I just think that might be the game for Michigan. So it's on, just to wrap things up here for the show, because you've been awesome today, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. What do you think is the matchup you're looking for? What do you think is going to determine the game for Penn State and Michigan coming up at Beaver Stadium this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one we just talked about is obviously a big one. At the same time, Michigan has let quarterbacks that can run, and I consider Sean Clifford in that category, similar to Peyton Thorne at Michigan State, where if you let him out of the pocket, he can run. They've let those guys gain some yardage at opportune times, for the offense for sure. So that's something to watch as well. Like if he does get out of the pocket, he might have some room to run. But these guys are fast when it comes to Hutchinson and Ojabo. I mean, Ojabo's faster than probably half the guys on the field, non-offensive linemen on the field. And he's, 6'6" and whatever, whatever he weighs. So, that's something to watch. I'll say to me, I mentioned red zone. Michigan struggled in that area this season. They've got a great kicker in Jake Moody. He's one of the top in the country. But I mean, he's had too many like 34-yard field goals, 32-yard field goals. Like those are red zone opportunities where Michigan has stalled out. So it's something to watch. I mean, Michigan has really struggled to punch it in for touchdowns in the red zone. And this is a Penn State defense that James Franklin talked about it on Tuesday. They've got a lot of speed and they've got a lot of length, and that helps in the red zone. So, and they've just been fantastic. Third in the country at touchdown percentage from a defensive standpoint. So I think Michigan's going to be able to move the ball a little bit. We've seen teams do it on Penn State, but Illinois rushed for 250 yards, but had 10 points in regulation.
Yep.
Like, if Michigan does something like that, let's say they move the ball and they have 430 yards or something like that and 17 points to show for it. I don't know if that's going to be enough. We'll see, I guess, what kind of Penn State offense we get in this game. But I think that is really the thing to watch. But it's a fascinating game. Penn State's getting healthier. Michigan's not as healthy right now. Michigan has more to play for, but Penn State isn't a team that's going to – we saw them resurrect their season last year. Like, they're not going to just fold on this season. And, I think it's going to be a hell of a matchup. Noon game. Michigan fans are a little relieved about that.
Yeah.
After the last couple times. Last time it was a non-night game, 2015. Michigan was able to go in there, handle their business against a worse Penn State team than we're going to see this year. But it's just a great time every time these two teams clash. The colors look good next to each other. It's been a historic series over the last couple decades, and
you'll be here for the first ever helmet game, not a whiteout. There's a blue stripe.
So can I ask you about that? Like, that's just a way to get around the whiteout, right?
Absolutely.
Like doing two whiteouts. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just like one section in the middle.
Yep.
Is just blue.
Yep.
Yeah. And they're encouraging everyone to get there early, right? I saw that. There's been a push for that, but well, you can't recreate though. You cannot recreate the whiteout in the night game though. So
nope.
I don't think it'll be as crazy. But Penn State has Jim Harbaugh said it. You can't fault these people for loving their football, and it's a great fan base. So it'll be a great atmosphere.
Yep. Yeah. They did. I don't think they want to do a whiteout in the day. That's just plain and simple. Right. They use the stripe out. They use the whiteout. They use that. So now they needed a new thing. This. I give them credit for creativity, but it is just like, it's just like 1 degree off of like, I know what you're doing, but also it's fine. You did it. You stuck the landing on. Okay, I get what you're doing there. But
I think everyone knew. Yeah. It'll be fun.
This has been an awesome conversation. Thanks you for giving me a little bit more time than I told you earlier. Clayton Sayfie of the Wolverine, part of the On3 Network, one of our sister channels here on On3. Thanks so much for coming on the BWI Daily Edition. Thanks for having me. Michigan fans out there, $1 for a year at the Wolverine, too. Same deal as Penn State. So I didn't want to speak both for fan bases. Yeah, both fan bases go and do it because these guys are doing an outstanding job. So. Well, I'm looking forward to the weekend, and I'm looking forward to working with you going in the future. That'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Make sure you follow the rest of the week because we've got more stuff coming up. Nate Bauer joining us tomorrow. We'll have post-practice impressions as well as Ryan Snyder's best bets and recruiting news on Friday. We got you covered with everything here. We might even sprinkle in some basketball news here at the end of the week on the BWI Daily. We'll talk to you then.